So people in the latest Livestream wanted me to talk about Aquinas' proofs of God, in particular the first way, but I'll go through all 5. And just for a reference, I found a good summary on the Minnesota State University website, so let's go through them. The first way is the argument from motion, the prime mover. There are 8 steps and they're pretty much all problematic. The first is, our senses prove that some things are in motion. Well, I don't really know how you can prove things from your senses. Our senses are wrong all the time. We do perceive some things in motion and some things at rest, but we perceive these things in relation to us. But what does it really mean that something's in motion? If the only thing in the entire universe is a single red ball, is the ball in motion or not? You see how the concept of motion becomes meaningless there? Motion is relative. Things are in motion or at rest relative to other things. If you observe something at rest, it's only because your relative velocities more or less match. Is your computer monitor in front of you at rest? Relative to you, it probably is, but it's on a planet that's spinning and hurtling through the galaxy. So whether it's moving or not depends entirely on your reference frame. Aquinas didn't know about relativity. He probably had some kind of ether concept, even though I don't think they had the word in his time. But the idea of this absoluteness to space where you can place a coordinate grid just isn't supported by the science. We know that this isn't how the universe works. So his first point alone being wrong automatically disproves the rest, but we'll go through them anyway. Things move when potential motion becomes actual motion. This is absolutely meaningless from a scientific standpoint. It doesn't even pass muster with Newtonian physics, let alone relativity. There's no such thing as potential motion. Newton's first law, every object in the universe will maintain a consistent velocity unless acted upon by a force. That's how it works. Only an actual motion can convert a potential motion into an actual motion. This makes no sense. It's a force that changes the velocity of an object. Nothing can be at once in both actuality and potentiality in the same respect, i.e., if both actual and potential, it is actual in one respect and potential in another. Yeah, this is likewise a bunch of nonsense. Therefore, nothing can move itself. Well then how did he walk, huh? How did Aquinas get from one place to another? Things move themselves all the time. You apply a force on yourself and you move. This isn't hard. This reminds me of those people who said the moonshot wouldn't work because rockets won't work in a vacuum because they don't have anything to push off of. But guess what? Newton won again. Therefore, each thing in motion is moved by something else. No, things are moved by forces. It takes energy, not matter. Energy can be transferred from one piece of matter to another, but it's actually energy that's doing it. He's saying that bits of matter are only moved by other bits of matter, not forces, and that's not how it works. The sequence of motion cannot extend ad infinitum. Well, says who? This is just an assumption that he makes with nothing to back it up, and we'll see him make it again and again. He's just shoving it in here artificially because his actual logic leads to an infinite regress. And if he has an infinite regress, then there's no room for his God. Therefore, it is necessary to arrive at a first mover, put in motion by no other, and this everyone understands to be God. So here we are, the prime mover. But didn't he just say in number 5 that nothing can move itself? So how does the prime mover get moved? If you're going to say that God is a prime mover, then that's an example of a mover that doesn't need a mover. So you've just refuted the entire basis for the argument, which is that everything that moves needs a mover. All this first way is an incredibly elaborate special pleading fallacy. Why couldn't the Big Bang be the prime mover? Why couldn't the universe have begun from a previous universe that collapsed? And who's to say there's just one prime mover? Maybe there are 2 prime movers, or 50, or 1,000,000. For that matter, why couldn't every single particle in the universe be its own prime mover, and after that it's all just interactions as movers move other movers? I really have a hard time understanding why anyone finds this at all convincing. Maybe in Aquinas' time, in the 13th century, when you hadn't had Newton or even Kepler or Copernicus, But how can any reasonably intelligent person in the 21st century think there's any validity to this? Alright, the second way, argument from efficient causes. We perceive a series of efficient causes of things in the world. This may not sound tautological, but it is. He's referring to Aristotle's efficient cause, which is something that causes motion to start or stop. So basically it means that things change because something changes them. Nothing exists prior to itself. Therefore, nothing in the world of things we perceive is the efficient cause of itself. If a previous efficient cause does not exist, neither does the thing that results, the effect. Therefore, if the first thing in a series does not exist, nothing in the series exists. So we're talking about causality here. From Aquinas' point of view, this is natural to conclude, but again, modern science throws a monkey wrench into the works. Virtual particles, particles that are uncaused but appear out of nowhere, have been verified experimentally. They're a consequence of the uncertainty principle, and we have a pretty good mathematical model for how the uncertainty principle leads to quantum foam, whereby these particles in an early inflationary universe create all of the matter and energy that we see. So the universe, as it turns out, doesn't need a cause of any kind, efficient or otherwise. If the series of efficient causes extends ad infinitum into the past, for then there would be no things existing now. Again, we can't have an infinite chain of causality because reasons. Why can't you have an infinite regression of efficient causes? Aquinas does nothing to rule this out. That is plainly false, i.e., there are things existing now that came about through efficient causes. Therefore, efficient causes do not extend ad infinitum into the past. Did you follow this? It's completely begging the question. He basically just said, it can't exist ad infinitum, therefore it doesn't exist ad infinitum. But again, he has no way of ruling out an infinite chain of causality. Therefore, it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause to which everyone gives the name of God. Well, again, why can't the cause be the Big Bang? And if it is God, then what caused God? And if God doesn't need a cause, why would the Big Bang need a cause? I wonder what Aquinas would have made of the fact that time was formed in the Big Bang, and therefore there was no before the Big Bang, meaning that nothing could have created it since there wasn't a time before it in order for it to have a previous efficient cause. In order for something to be caused, there has to be a moment in time where there isn't the thing, and then you cause it, and then it exists. But if there's no time before the Big Bang, why would it need to have a cause? Okay, the third way, argument from possibility and necessity, reductio argument. We find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be that come into being and go out of being, i.e. contingent beings. So things are born and things die, but the net energy of the universe is constant. So really all that's happening is that things are being reshaped from one form to the next. The matter that makes up you was a star. Then it was a supernova. Then it was a cosmic dust cloud, and eventually it all formed you. And when you're gone, your matter will go on to become other things. Assume that every being is a contingent being. For each contingent being, there is a time it does not exist. Therefore, it is impossible for these always to exist. Therefore, there could have been a time when no things existed. Therefore, at that time, there would have been nothing to bring the currently existing contingent beings into existence. Therefore, nothing would be in existence now. As I said before, we know this isn't true. Quantum mechanics explains it quite well. Also, he makes a mistake when he says there could have been a time when no things existed. That doesn't mean that there necessarily was. So again, he can't rule out an infinite regression. Also, as it turns out, nothingness is a really unstable system. Aquinas says what creationists continue to say to this day, you can't get something from nothing. But in a probabilistic universe, nothing is actually very improbable, because there are an infinite number of ways that you can have something, but only one way that you can have nothing. So if you ever did have true universal nothingness, it wouldn't last long before you ended up with something. We have reached an absurd result from assuming that every being is a contingent being. Therefore, not every being is a contingent being. So he's attempting a proof by contradiction here, but he still hasn't properly ruled out an infinite regression of causes going back forever. Therefore, some being exists of its own necessity, and does not receive its existence from another being, but rather causes them. This all men speak of as God. But again, why does it have to be God? Why can't it be the Big Bang? Why can't it be quantum foam? And like with the prime mover, if we indeed have proven that not all beings are contingent beings, who's to say there's only one non-contingent being? Why couldn't there be a million? All Aquinas has done here is to destroy the very chain of causality he needs. He has, in fact, properly concluded that it's possible for things without a cause to begin to exist, but he didn't follow it to its logical conclusion. He started with his conclusion of God and tried to warp the logic to fit it. But if you don't start with that, if you don't start with any preconceived conclusion at all, then you begin to consider the question of uncaused events, which leads you to the uncertainty principle, which leads you to quantum mechanics. Yes, if Aquinas were truly following the logic to its conclusion, instead of insisting that the answer must be God, he could have come to something resembling quantum mechanics back in the 13th century. So close, and yet so far. The fourth way, argument from gradation of being. There is a gradation to be found in things. Some are better or worse than others. That's a human value judgment. There's no reason it should apply fundamentally to things in the universe. Predications of degree require reference to the uttermost case, e.g., a thing is said to be hotter according as it more nearly resembles that which is hottest. But what would it mean to be hottest? We know things can get way hotter than Aquinas could ever have imagined, so hot it turns into a plasma soup like the one our sun is made of, and that isn't even as hot as it can get. Really, there is no theoretical upward limit, and this will come into play in the next step. Also, why is hotter better than cooler? Why isn't absolute zero the uttermost case? This is just completely arbitrary. The maximum in any genus is the cause of all in that genus. Okay, since you used the example of things being hotter, the Big Bang was a singularity. It was infinitely dense, therefore it was infinitely hot. So you've just helped establish that the Big Bang can indeed be the prime cause of everything in the universe. Thanks for that! And yes, of course, Aquinas had no way of knowing about the Big Bang, but these are supposed to be universally applicable logical proofs, and the mere fact that we even have things like the Big Bang in quantum mechanics shows that they aren't. They were, in fact, limited by Aquinas' imagination, which makes all of these arguments from incredulity. Aquinas couldn't think of any other way it could have happened, therefore it must have been God. One wonders how much faster science would have progressed if Aquinas didn't have religion limiting his mental reasoning. Therefore, there must also be something which is to all beings the cause of their being, goodness, and every other perfection, and this we call God. We're going back to goodness again, but as I said before, that's just a human value judgment. Stars and planets and galaxies and virtual particles do not possess qualities of goodness or badness. They just are. And finally, the fifth way, argument from design. We see that natural bodies work towards some goal, and do not do so by chance. Except, of course, they don't work towards some goal. They're just obeying natural laws. Evolution doesn't have a goal. Nuclear decay doesn't have a goal. What goal is a spiral galaxy working towards? Most natural things lack knowledge. Knowledge is another loaded word based on human perception. All natural things do have information. But as an arrow reaches its target because it is directed by an archer, well, the arrow is just obeying physical laws. The arrow itself isn't trying to reach a target. Again, the concept of a target is an entirely human construct overlaid on the process. The arrow is going to hit something, Newton's first law again. What lacks intelligence achieves goals by being directed by something intelligent. Again, goals are a human concept. So the only way they possibly could achieve goals is by human manipulation. They don't achieve goals on their own because there's no concept of goals in the natural world. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end, and this being we call God. Yeah, these all really fall apart at the end, don't they? In each and every case, the last step is, here's something I don't understand, therefore God. And that's why religion is so limiting. When you have an arbitrary concept like God that you can use as a pseudo-answer to any problem that might arise, you do not get knowledge, just the illusion of knowledge. It feels like an answer, but it doesn't give you any useful information. You can't use it to make predictions. You might as well substitute the word God with magic or phlogiston. The only satisfaction you get from it is hindsight bias, because the arguments were deliberately fitted to the preconceived conclusion. You haven't explained the mystery, you've just given it a label. As Karl Popper said, an idea that explains everything, in reality, explains nothing. So thanks for watching. As usual, please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And if you want to support this channel, well, if you're running the Airtime extension, you already have. If not, just go get it at airtime.bogosity.tv or go to donate.bogosity.tv, where you can give a one-time donation via PayPal or crypto, or become a regular supporter at Patreon and Subscribestar to get benefits like early videos and participation in the monthly live stream. See you next time, and until then, stay strong and be free.